World War II affected nearly everyone in America, positively and negatively. If you were an adult in World War II, how much of your wealth would you be willing to give to the war? That was a big question during the war. World War II was incredibly expensive, and the government had two major ways of gathering funds: income tax and war bonds. Before the war, only the very wealthy paid income tax. But the war changed that. During the war, the number of Americans required to pay federal taxes rose from 4 million in 1939 to 43 million in 1945. With so many taxpayers, the American government took in 45 billion in 1945, an enormous increase over the 9 billion collected just 4 years prior. Americans who earned as little as $500 a year paid an income tax of 23%, while those who earned more than $1 million paid an astounding 94%. This increased the size of the federal government, and it became hard to ever go back. The other method of funding was bonds. Though bonds returned only 2.9% annual interest, they served as a valuable source of revenue for the federal government and an extremely important investment for many Americans. Bonds served as a way for citizens to make an economic contribution to the war. Here is a chart showing the highest and lowest marginal tax rate in America during the past century, showing how tax rates increased dramatically during the war. Hitler rose to power in part because the US ignored Germany during the Great Depression. Desperate for capital after the Depression, the US began to recall loans from Europe. This caused rapid unemployment in Germany, whose economy relied heavily on investment from the US, creating a lot of frustration. At the start of the war, unemployment in the US was still close to 25%. The war, and specifically the Lend-Lease Act, changed that. Almost immediately, unemployment dropped to zero, pushing many African American families to move to the cities. Companies that normally produced household goods started producing artillery. After World War II ended, the economy had been set up for war production and had to be converted to peacetime production, which took time. A war economy prioritizes the production of goods and services that support war efforts while also strengthening the economy. Unemployment rose again, some factories closed, and many men were looking for jobs at the same time. American leaders helped the economy recover by making the US the center of the global economy. America was lucky that it had not been bombed in the mainland, and therefore, American companies had an advantage over German and Japanese counterparts. During this period, America also provided hundreds of billions of dollars to Europe and Japan for rebuilding. This allowed America to have favorable import and export terms with these countries. While the US heavily taxed its citizens, it seemed to have turned a blind eye towards the dealings of the country's biggest companies. Germany was one of the great powers of Europe, so naturally many US companies had German subsidiaries. When the war started, it was not in their financial interests to stop production. Companies like Chase Bank, GM, and IBM played both sides. For example, IBM employees were training SS personnel how to use their machines to record the movement, sorting, and mass execution of large numbers of so-called undesirables, at times right in the headquarters of the death camps. So in conclusion, the war greatly benefited US economy and companies, while also changing the world's economy and the size of the US government forever.